Okay, namaste everybody. So this is the 16th in the series of lectures on Patanjali Yoga Sutra. And as always, I'll quickly recap what we have done so far. So the first chapter is called Samadhi Pada. And in that chapter, can everybody go on mute, please, so that we don't have any disturbance other than me? Yes, right. Yeah, everybody's on mute. Great. Huh? So he defines yoga as chitta vritti nirodha. Very briefly, consciousness is pure awareness. It is complete stillness, but we do not experience it that way because on our consciousness is always our thoughts, emotions, and feelings are playing and modifying it. And this is what is called vrittis. It's like waves on the surface of a lake so that the bottom of the lake is not visible. And yoga aims to stop these vrittis. Once the vrittis are stopped, then you are absorbed in that stillness. So that's the goal of yoga. We were discussing that just now, right? And the 5 categories of modification of the chitta is pramana, or right knowledge. So you see a rope and it registers in your mind as a rope is a disturbance in your mind. Or wrong knowledge, you see a rope and it registers a snake, it still, creates a disturbance in your mind. Or vikalpa, imaginary knowledge, you see a rope and imagine that it is, and the knowledge it floats in is a whiff of air. So that's also a disturbance. Deep sleep is also a disturbance because the consciousness is active in deep sleep. And you know this because when you wake up from deep sleep, you have a sense, I slept well. So the consciousness is still there. And consciousness, for its object is no knowledge, is the object of consciousness. And smriti, which is past knowledge, your memory, right? And the method to stop vrittis is abhyasa and vairagya. So abhyasa and vairagya are the twin engines of yoga. Uninterrupted, regular practice, abhyasa, and vairagya is slowly detaching from desires and the ego, right? And once the vrittis are reduced, then samadhi pragna, or samapati as it's called, kicks in. It is basically refers to the meditative state. So now the sadhaka can close his eyes and he's in a meditative state. So he can go into the practice of dharana, dhyana, samadhi, right? And samadhi itself has 4 stages. Vitark, or a stage where the mind is still working, the thinking is going on, reasoning is going on, but there is stillness. Then the next stage is vichara, where the thinking stops and the mind, the chitta is observing. Observation is taking place. And shananda, where even the observation stops and whatever object you're meditating on starts reflecting in a very clear mind, right? And asmita, or absorption. Then finally, the mind gets absorbed in that reflection. So these are 4 stages of samadhi. And as we were discussing, these are still samadhi with a seed, and the higher samadhi is nirbija samadhi, or when all the seeds of karma are burnt and then there is no rebirth, then you will achieve the state of nirvana. So in the second chapter is called sadhana pada. So in the first chapter with samadhi, Patanjali addressed the advanced yogi, the person who has gone through many practices and can get into a meditative state at the drop of the hat, right? So Patanjali addressed that yogi with samadhi pada. In the second chapter, first he addresses the middle level yogi, who has still not achieved, that meditative consciousness. So to him, he says, practice tapa. Tapa is the continued practice of Ashtanga Yoga and simplification of your life so that you kind of reduce the jakad, the hold of desires, the hold of the ego. You reduce that, and Ashtanga Yoga will also reduce that. This will bring the mind to peace, right? Once you have mastered tapa, then the next step is swadhyaya or self-study, which becomes easy because once your mind is at peace, swadhyaya is nothing but observing your own mechanism, observing your own mind, observing how vrittis come up, rise and ebb. So you understand your own mechanism, you understand the nature of vrittis, right? That is swadhyaya. And so vrittis are revealed in that. And once the mind is made quiet with tapas, it is trained to observe unconditionally without any lens. It's just observing through swadhyaya. Then Ishwar Pranidhana, or you can see the inner awareness. You can get a glimpse of this still consciousness. You can get a glimpse of the bottom of the lake. It's called Ishwar Pranidhana. The other meaning of Ishwar Pranidhana is that you get detached from the fruits of your action and you surrender that fruits to Ishwar. So there are two dual meanings, right? And then he talks about the 5 human afflictions. It's called Pancha Kleshas. What are the Pancha Kleshas? So the root klesha is avidya. The root klesha is ignorance, that you are considering the world as real and you don't know that there is an underlying consciousness which is the reality, avidya. And once ignorance afflicts you, the next thing to afflict you is that you start identifying with the mind and body and the ego. It's called asmita. So avidya leads to asmita, identification with mind, body, and the sense of I, the ego, right? Once you are identified with the mind, body, then the next 2 afflictions are that you start seeking worldly pleasures and avoiding worldly pains. So it's called raga and dvesha, which is, infatuations or attractions and aversions. So avidya leads to asmita, leads to raga and dvesha. And again, for the same reason, because you're identified with the mind body, the last affliction is abhinivesha or clinging to life, because then you don't want the body to die because you think you are the body. So abhinivesha is clinging to life. So this are the 5 afflictions: ignorance, ego, attraction, repulsion, and fear of death, or clinging to life. The 5 afflictions. And these afflictions are at the root of karma, because these afflictions will make you do actions. So you will chase after things which are pleasurable, you run away from things which are not pleasurable, you will keep on doing things to not die, And so with all these actions, you have karma. And the karma is a cycle, as you know. If you have karma, you will get reborn, and again karma. So you have karma, klesha, karma is a vicious cycle, right? Then after that, addressing the middling yogi, he addresses the novice yogi. And to the novice yogi, he says, here's Ashtanga Yoga, which is yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, and dharana, dhyana, samadhi. The first 5, yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, and pratyahara, is called bahirang yoga. That means external yoga. And the last 3, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, are antarang yoga, or inner yoga, right? So this is the second chapter. Second chapter, he gives all the first and second chapter. He gives all the vidhis of yoga. So samadhi, kriya yoga, ashtanga yoga, right? So in the third chapter is called Vibhuti Pada, and Vibhuti Pada, he talks about all the powers which yogis get. And when I go through this today's talk, you would be familiar with some powers. You would have heard of them, maybe even seen them, right? So these powers are not magical. The yoga will give, if you do yoga, reach that stage, you will get those powers. And there's a logic to it. So I just need to explain to you this samyama. So the dharana is when you can concentrate on one object and subdue all other thoughts. So I'm only concentrating on Om and all other thoughts are subdued. And I'm doing that with effort, right? But I've reached a state through the Ashtanga Yoga. My mind is quiet enough to be able to do that. Okay. So that's dharana. Then the next stage is dhyana, where the consciousness automatically flows toward Om without any effort. So then you get into some kind of a trance that, it's just flowing, consciousness just flowing. You don't do anything. So that's dhyana. And the last is samadhi, where there's a total sense of oneness, that Om is merged in the consciousness. So sometimes yogi describes, I don't know whether I was observing the Om or Om was observing me. But anyway, it's complete absorption in that consciousness. You're totally absorbed in that consciousness. So that is samadhi. Now, proficient yogis can do all these three together. That means they can concentrate, they can project consciousness, and they can get absorbed in that consciousness altogether. All right. So what happens is that when you do samyama on any object, you kind of, just to explain, you kind of become that object. So you know the inner mechanism of the object. The object reveals its powers to you. You gain the powers of that object. So that is how yogis get those powers. They get powers of everything in nature. The second thing you need to understand is that we see ourselves confined by our own bodies, right? But this entire existence is one fabric. And we are all, little dots in that fabric. But the yogi who achieves this samyama, or, this level of samadhi, becomes that whole fabric. So everything in Prakriti, in nature, he knows and he has power over, right? So this is how people get yogic powers. But every yoga text from every sampradaya, every tantra text from every sampradaya, every agama says that do not show off these powers. These powers are nothing. They are just power over nature, right? So because the reason is that you have worked so hard to overcome your ego, right? And if you show off this power, then you say, look, hey, I can do this. So those yogis who show off their power, they fall so hard that they can never get up again. They will not get up for many lifetimes after that. So they are called yog bhrashta. So it is very clear, do not show off these powers. Now, earlier, when I have talked about Patanjali Yoga Sutra, say 2-3 years earlier, I usually skip this chapter for two reasons. One is people found it very outlandish, incredulous, right? And the second reason is that they weren't ready to have this knowledge. But I have just a intuitive sense that I think we have hit a level of consciousness collectively where this knowledge should be put out. There's nothing wrong with this knowledge. It's in the book. All the texts of yoga say it, all the texts of tantra say it. And we should know it, but we should understand its real nature, that this is not the end. In fact, it's a double-edged sword. It's if you misuse it, then it will harm you. It will harm you very badly, because then you are coming in the way of the karmic flow. And you'll fall so hard that nobody can save you. So with that thing, I will now go into the samadhis, right? So, okay, one more thing from the last thing which I had explained, that when you do samyama, that is when you're concentrating, the consciousness flowing, and you're getting absorbed in the consciousness, there are three parinamas, or three transformations which are taking place. So first transformation is called samadhi parinama. Samadhi parinama means that you can focus on one object and subdue everything else, right? Then that's a transformation, because your normal mind is, it cannot do that. Normal mind is chanchal. It goes from one thought to the other. That's normal mind, right? So this is a transformation of the mind, the transformation of the chitta. Samadhi, parinam. Parinam means change. So samadhi parinam is the focus on one object, Om, and all other thoughts are subdued, right? Then the next transformation, ekagrada parinama, is when consciousness flows very easily towards that particular object. And the third one is nirodha parinama. So basically, what this process is, that you are taking one thought to subdue all thoughts, and then you're dropping that thought also. So it's like, when we were kids and run around and, we were pricked by a thorn, you'll pick up another thorn and scoop out that first thorn and then throw that thorn. So the third one is nirodha parinama. So when you are like absorbed in, say, Om, and so you have Om rising, and then Om receding, and there's a gap. And then Om rises again and recedes again, gap. So when you focus on that gap, it's called nirodha parinama. Now, because then you are focusing on no thought. And if that gap increases, then you reach the state of samadhi. So there are three parinamas. So when the yogi does samyama on these three parinamas, nirodha, samadhi, and ekagrada parinama, the yogi transcends time. So we are all in a circle of time. So we see things sequentially. We see things as past, we see things as now, and we see things as the future. So the concept of past, present, future. But a yogi who has samyama on nirodha, samadhi, and ekagrata will transcend time. So he will see past, present, and future as one continuum. He will see himself from the beginningless time, coming like a little snake worm going to the future. He'll know all his past lives. He'll know all his future lives. And again, why is that? Because where will the past drop? Everything is in the substratum of consciousness, the universal consciousness. Call it Purusha, Brahman, whatever you want to call it. So that is all there is. So nothing can fall off from there. So the past doesn't fall off. It remains. Only we are oriented to past, over, and now and future. Once that we have broken that barrier of time, everything is there in the substratum. So you can see a past, present, future as one continuum. So this is the siddhi which a yogi gets, right? The second is that when we see an object, in this particular case, I'm taking the example of a cow. So there are three things in the object. So there's a name, cow. There's a form, cow, and there's an idea, cow. So the idea of cow could be that if you're a Hindu, you say Gau Mata is an idea. If you're not a Hindu, you might think of it as milk or food, whatever, some idea. But normally, when we see a cow, we don't distinguish name, form, and idea. But a yogi at that level of consciousness separates the three. And when he separates the three, the power he gets is the power to commune with animals and birds. So this you may have heard of, that yogis can talk to snakes and animals and birds and understand what they're saying. So this is a power which a yogi gets, right? A yogi can also concentrate on others' minds, right? So Sri M tells the story in his book when he was in the Himalayas, that he was a disciple of a Baba called Maheshwar Baba, right? And in the evening, once they were all living in caves, so he walked off and he was going somewhere, and there was a Buddhist monk in some cave in the Himalayas, and that monk told Sri M. Sri M was 21 years old at that time. Told Sri M, Acha, so you had this conversation with Maheshwar Baba, you know. So the yogi can know the thoughts and images, past, present, future of another. This is what's called clairvoyance, right? However, at the first level, the knowledge is of a very general nature. So the yogi will sense things like love, hate, anger, but not particular thoughts. That comes at a higher level, right? However, again, a true yogi will never trespass somebody else's freedom or privacy, not misuse that power, right? And therefore, these are not to be used against their will, right? And if they do, then that locks up the energy, that interferes with the karmic flow, and the growth of the yogi will stop, right? Then I'm sure you have heard of yogis who become invisible. Suddenly they're standing there and PC Sarkar, gone, you can't see them. How does that happen? So the yogi can do samyama on the form of the body. Now, once he does the once he gets a mastery over that, then what happens is he can control the reflection of light from his body. So he's there, but the light is not reflecting, so you can't see him. So he's become invisible, right? The explanation is very, very scientific. So the body is made of the tattvas, the earth, water, fire, air, and akasha, space, right? Now, each of these tattvas correspond to the subtle sense. So earth has the subtle sense of smell. It's called tanmatra, right? Then water has the subtle sense of taste. Then fire has a subtle sense of touch. And, air has fire subtle sense of form, sight, connected to the eyes. Then air has a subtle sense of touch, it's movement, so touch. And akasha is sound. So you can see the tattvas as the gross reality, while tanmatras are the subtle quality of the tattvas. What happens is the yogi gets full control over these tanmatras. So sometimes when you are in the presence of a very enlightened soul, a saint, a guru, you feel that you have a hunch of silence around him. So all the sound is getting absorbed. Sound is not emanating. It's a hunch of silence around a person, enlightened person. So it is because of this kind of quality. All right. Then comes samyama on karmas. So karma is, you can understand karma as, so all the karmas which you've acquired over many lifetimes is called sanchita karma. And when you took birth in this lifetime, from that store of sanchita karma, from that cosmic locker, you opened it, from all the bags of sanchita karma, you took out a few bags, and then you came into this birth to say, these are the karmas I want to experience in this birth. So that karma is called prarabdha karma. Okay. So when you perform samyama on prarabdha karma, you get to know the exact time of your death. So a normal person would think of the exact time of death, my God, it's very morbid. It's a morbid thought. But for a yogi, it's a very good information, because then he can choose how he's going to die in that moment. And it is said that yogis who die with full awareness, they attain nirvana. So it's an important siddhi, right? Then samyama on virtues. The virtues are maitri, which is friendliness, karuna, which is compassion, upeksha, which is indifference to things which are evil, right? And mudita, which is delight in other people's success, right? And especially those of virtuous people, right? So when you do samyama on these, then these qualities you develop to very high degree, such a high degree that another person coming in contact with you, will also get that. You can transfer it to, you can infuse others with that. So it is said about the Buddha that he didn't have a molecule of anger in his personality. He didn't have a molecule of anger. He was full of compassion. So a lot of people who were drawn to Buddha was not so much of his philosophy, but the person himself, right? So by samyama on the virtues, the yogi becomes the virtue, right? Then you've heard of yogis who will close their eyes and suppose you have lost your keys somewhere, and the yogi will just close his eyes and say, the key is, look under the pillow over there, and you'll find the key. Or there are yogis who say, I have never been to Radha's house. For example, I have been to her house, but suppose I have, just example, not been to her house. So I think of her house and say, Radha, your house is like this, is on the 5th floor. You enter, living room, pink sofa. I describe everything in the house, right? So this is called Jyotishmati Pravritti, or illuminating power. And the yogi can develop this power through the power of samyama on this superphysical faculty, right? So even things that are obscure is known to the yogi. Now we come to samyama on sun, moon, and stars. Okay, now this has to be explained, and I think this was a question we know that asked some time back. I remember. Patanjali did not mention chakras by their names, right? Shivanand Saraswati, in his commentary, he says that first, because chakras is a tantric idea, not specifically a yoga idea. And second, Tantra may have come into disrepute when this was written. So he didn't use the word chakras, right? So when he says sun, it could mean the stars, the planet sun, the star sun, right? It could also mean the Muladhara chakra, and it could also mean the Pingala Nadi. So there are 3 main nadis, corresponding to your spine. The middle of that is Sushumna, and then Ida on the left and Pingala on the right, right? So it could mean any of these 3 things, right? And the other thing is, and there's a text actually called Shiva Samhita. It's a short text, beautiful text. It's yogic and tantric, and nobody knows who the author is. The author is unknown, right? It's called Shiv Samhita, right? So it describes it. I'm going to read verbatim. Okay, so in inverted commas, in the body, Mount Meru refers to the vertebra, to your backbone, right? Is surrounded by 7 islands, are the 7 chakras. There are rivers, seas, mountains, fields, and lords of the fields. Refers to all the nadis and the other 108 chakras, right? There are in it seers and sages, sacred pilgrimages, shrines, presiding deities of the shrines. Now, this again is a very tantric concept, because Tantra says you don't have to go to a temple, external temple. Temple is within you, and each chakra has a certain role. It's got a presiding deity. You kind of do bhakti to that deity. The deity will give you powers. So this is what it refers, that There are in its seers and sages, sacred pilgrimages, shrines, and presiding deities. The sun, moon, agents of creation and destruction also move in it, right? Ether, air, fire, water, and earth are also there. But ordinary men do not know it. He who knows all this is the yogi. There's a nectar-rayed moon on top of the spine, and it rains nectar all day, right? And the nectar flows downward through the Ida and nourishes the body. At the bottom of the Meru, which is the Muladhara chakra, is the sun. Its rays flows upward through the Pingala. It is the giver of nirvana. And then the text goes on to describe nadis, chakras, tattvas, right? So basically, the entire cosmos is Brahmanda, and the subtle body is Pinda, and it's got the same configuration, right? So when the yogi does samyama on the sun, in which is Muladhara, Ida, or even the physical sun, right? Planets, which are the the other chakras or the planets, right? Nadis and deities, a special level of consciousness arises. There's jump in consciousness, right? And it kind of breaks through the average mind, right? And siddhis are obtained because of this. So how did our ancient rishis make astonishing astronomical discoveries? So they had calculated the distance from the earth to the moon and to the sun. They knew the planets. When everybody thought the earth was flat, they knew it was not. Bhugol, So how did they know this? This is the way, because they figured out, they saw it within them and extrapolated it, right? And they knew that there's the same thing outside, right? So when you do samyama on the sun, you get the knowledge of the entire solar system, or you get the knowledge of the entire solar system within your body. All right. And when you do samyama on the moon over here means Swadhisthana chakra, or the Ida Nadi, or even the external moon, you will get the arrangement of all the stars. That means all the other, 101 chakras, right? And when you do the samyama on the pole star, so pole star is a like a near constant. So on a symbolic constant, you will know the movement. The chakras are also moving inside a body. So it's a chakra is not always in the same place. There's a movement taking place, right? So you will get to know the movement of the chakras. All right. So this is very, very important, and it doesn't matter whether you are concentrating on the sun within you or the external sun. You will get the same knowledge, because one is a microcosm of the other, or other is a macrocosm of the other, right? Then by doing sammama on the Manipura chakra, you will know how your body is organized, right? And you know that the yogic and Upanishadic definition, or the body structure is very different from the normal modern science. Modern science sees body just as physical body, while yoga and Upanishad sees it as 5 layers of the body. There's a gross body, there is a pranic body, there's a mental sheath, intellectual sheath, and the bliss sheath, Anandamaya Kosha, right? And that's how did the yogis know it? By doing samyama on the Manipura chakra. And when they do samyama on the Vishuddhi chakra, thirst and hunger goes away. So there's a very interesting story in this book called the what's that? Autobiography of the Yogi. So it's somewhere in Bengal, somewhere near Asansol, Bardwan, that side, where a woman who was very fond of eating, and she was overweight, and her mother-in-law would like coax her, like, you eat too much, stop eating, So she got very fed up one day and she went and stood by the river and she prayed that, give me freedom from food. And somebody appeared, yogi or a deva, whoever, somebody appeared, touched her, and she got the siddhi that she need not eat, and she never ate after that. All right. So the yogi can get freedom from thirst and hunger by doing samyam on the kurma nadi. Kurma nadi is the thyroid gland. So when you do this, where the chin touches, somewhere over there, between the collarbone, just above the collarbone, the thyroid gland, the breathing of the yogi will stop. Then the chakras will ingest prana directly. And the yogi will become completely humble, completely motionless. Right? So the story of a Siddha, Tamil Siddha, called Sada Shivendra Avaduta, Sada Shivendra Avaduta, Sada Shivendra Saraswati Avaduta, he was called. I don't know when he lived, maybe 14th, 15th century, around that time he lived. And he was meditating on the bank of a river, and there was flash flood which swept him away. And the people, his disciples and all, went looking for him. They didn't find him and they thought he was dead. And then they gave up. And a few years later, they were doing something by the river, building something. They dug and they found him alive. Okay. And then that fellow, he wrote this book on Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Okay. So these are there in real life. Okay. Then when you do samyam on the Sahasrara chakra, you can commune with souls who have departed, with masters, with perfected beings. The yogi can communicate with them and obtain their grace and guidance. So in my recent readings, I was reading about this Jain mystic called Kunda, also from South India. I don't know why all these enlightened people are from Southern India. So, but Kunda was a Jain saint, and he went and communed with the arhats, that means the Jain saints who had achieved nirvana, and they were in some other dimension. So he could commune with them, and they blessed him, and he kind of became very enlightened and very mystical, right? And if you don't do all this above, then if you were to do samyama on pratibha, and I would explain pratibha, knowledge of everything which I've just talked about is gained, right? So what is pratibha? So our mind works in two ways. We either use logic, reason step by step, or some of us are intuitive. We just join the dots and get the picture, right? But pratibha is a higher type of intuitive power. It's got no reasoning in it. It's like light, and that light is thrown on everything, and you get knowledge of everything. So you almost become omniscient, right? You know everything. You get vivek jnana, you get discriminating, high order of knowledge you get. So just like the sunlight makes everything visible, pratibha will make everything understandable all at once. And once the yogi taps into pratibha, all these powers come to the yogi. And when the yogi concentrates anhata, heart chakra, he gets the mechanism of the mind is known to him. Okay. Now, another power which you have heard of, yogis can enter other people's bodies. So how do they do that? Two things. So one is they know how to loosen the bondage of their subtle body with their gross body. So the subtle body can kind of float, right? And the other is that they know from which nadi to enter some other body, right? But this is a very high order siddhi, very, very high order siddhi, right? And some of the examples, one example is again from the south, Tirumular. So Thirumular is a very, very revered Tamil Siddha. He wrote this fantastic book called Thirumantiram. He was walking somewhere in the villages, and he found a lot of these cows, cattle, like very sad. And he went there to find out why they were sad. And he found that the cow herd uh, was dead. So he took pity on the cows and he entered the body of that cow herd and rose up. And then with the cows, he went home. And then he hid his own body under a tree. And some other villagers passing, they found that dead body, they cremated the body. So then he came back to get into his own body and find no body. So he remained in that body, and that person's name was Mulan. So he remained as Mulan, and he got the name Thiru Mular from Mulan. And that Mulan's wife realized that he is not my husband; he's somebody else. And then he just sat under the tree and he began to sing all these verses, which are compiled in Thirumantiram. There's another slightly more juicy story about Shankaracharya. So Shankaracharya, when he beat Mandana Mishra in that famous debate, and his wife was the judge. So she asked Shankaracharya questions on conjugal life. He says, Shankaracharya, I don't know. I'm brahmachari. How do I know about conjugal life? He says, no, you got to answer it. So he was walking, and the king of Raja of Banaras, he had gone to a forest and he had died. So Shankara got into his body, told his disciples, preserve my body, and he went and enjoyed conjugal bliss with the queens. And then he came back and he told Mandana's wife all about this, and he went back into his body. So these are some stories, right? Then when you do samyama on your prana, then the yogi gets the power to levitate. And it's nothing, because the prana, there are 5 pranas. Some pranas are upward motion, some are downward motion. So if you have control over the prana, you can lift yourself. You can defy gravity. There's no big deal about it. You can also use prana to develop a lot of radiance and aura around you, right? And when you do samyama of the relationship of the body and the akasha, body and space, then you become light like a feather. You can float, but not in your actually real body, but your subtle body can leave and it can float. And Sri M again talks about this siddhi which he got, and he describes how when he got it first, he was so fascinated that he would get out and start floating. So once he followed his guru, and Maheshwara saw him, he said, hey, go back. So this floating is that power is got when you do samyama on the body and the akasha. Okay. When you do samyama on the panchabhutas, that means the 5 elements, earth, water, air, fire, etc., you get the ashta siddhis, or the 8 major siddhis. They are anima. You have the power to become as small as an atom. Laghima, you become light. Mahima, you become huge, like what Hanuman did. Garima, you become very heavy. You become prapti, or the capacity to be anywhere, right? Prakamya, or the unobstructed fulfillment of desire. So again, there's a story in the autobiography of Yogi where Babaji, he calls Lahiri Mahashay, and Lahiri Mahashay at that time didn't know what his destiny was. So Babaji calls him and says, this is your destiny. So you tell me, I'll give you all the powers so you can teach. But tell me if you have any unfulfilled desires, because otherwise that will come in the way. So he says, well, I've always had this passion, or this desire to live in a golden palace. So boom, Babaji creates a palace of gold, and our friend goes and lives there for some time, then comes back, and then the palace is gone, right? Then when you can distinguish between your mind and consciousness. So what happens is that it is easier to say that I am not the body. The body is very gross, right? So the sense that, you know, I am in the body, but I'm not the body is easier to get, right? But I am not my mind, I'm not my thoughts and emotions is more difficult, right? And what happens is ordinarily that consciousness or awareness and thoughts are merged in one, right? And the yogi can separate it, can see awareness as separate and thoughts as separate. Once he can do that, that is like almost reaching kind of samadhi. You know, he becomes omnipotent and omniscient, right? And when these powers happen, the yogi will start receiving invitations from higher beings, right? From supraphysical entities. And his advice, don't show any pride or attachment to these invitations. They're just, this is on the way to samadhi, all this will happen. And that is when the yogi starts like crossing over mundane existence, right? And that is when he starts entering into the field of Kaivalya, which is the last chapter, which I'll cover from the next session. I think in the next 3 sessions, I'll cover Kaivalya and then we'll be done with the Patanjali Yoga. So I hope your idea that yoga is Surya Namaskar and Anulom Vilom is shattered forever. I really, you can put on your microphones if you want. Put on your microphones so I can hear you laugh. It is absolutely put on your unmute yourself. Yeah, it is absolutely shattered forever. So yoga tantra it's got huge power, and this power can be misused like everything else. Human beings can misuse anything which is powerful or elevate themselves. We can use nuclear energy to destroy each other. We can use nuclear energy to better our lives. Electricity, you put your bloody finger in the socket, then you'll do a lot of damage to yourself. Otherwise, light and zoom, everything is working on electricity. So yoga is hugely powerful. When people say, you know, yoga for, you know, my flexibility and health and beauty is all nothing. That's like not even kindergarten. It is like, you know, the lower kindergarten, not even lower, the play school stuff. This is yoga. Yoga is a transformation of your consciousness. And all these powers are again nothing. I mean, after all, there's nothing. These powers are not these powers are just the steps of the ladder to get to nirvana. Yes, sir. Mr. Vinod, throw some light. Vinod ji,
No, my only point is, Atul, that these, you know it, I know it, that these are great distractions in the if you are very clear that you will stop at nothing but attainment of the supreme.
Correct.
Where you merge literally with the real, with Brahman. So these are great distractions. They are sort of pulling you down, actually. They do not add anything to your... so the Shastras are very clear that these will come along the way. As you do your sadhana, you will get some of this manifesting in yourself. But be very careful. Be very careful, and best would be not to exhibit it.
Absolutely.
With your own. Right? I just thought that this caveat should be there.
No, there's a story of the Ramakrishna. No? Ramakrishna used to meditate in a little forest around where his ashram is today, and there was another, you know, person who used to meditate with him earlier had come down, so they both went to meditate in that forest. And on the way back, Ramakrishna said to his friend, "Ki, like, you have a torch?" So he said, "Why torch?" And he put out light from it, like a torch. So when he reached, they reached back the ashram, and Ramkirtan took away that power from him. He said, now you won't have that power. He said, you're not supposed to display it.
Absolutely.
That's what he did. You're absolutely right. But add some more light, because you also have a guru in Trishur, and you might have heard these things. What is there anything you can add from the Vedanta tradition to this?
Yeah, so the Vedanta says that for the realized person, if he brings anything into his sankalpa, he just has to, constantly just dwell on it. So that is why people go to them with ailments and problems of their lives. Why are these gurus so popular, and why are so many people flocking to them? A lot of them have what we can say, some of these siddhis where something in their life gets impacted. And so the guru is very careful before he really changes the fate, because you're playing against the prarabdha karmas. You just spoke about that. Kriyaman karmas.
Yes.
So the person is meant to maybe suffer, but because the guru is so enlightened and so powerful, he can change that.
He can change it. He has the power to change that. Yes.
He has the power. And we have seen with our Swamiji that people who have not, the women who have not conceived for a long time, and the people and they're worried, ki kya hoga, vansh vriddhi, blah blah, all that we carry in our heads. And he has given them something to eat or whatever, and lo behold, the conception happens, and the child is born. So I've seen that. This I've seen with my guru very couple of occasions. One of them with my own brother Ajay. He had he got married 6 years, nothing. And then my mother went to Swamiji and said, Swamiji, do something. This is like, how can my son be without a child? And then he called and then both of them sat with him, and then he gave them something with butter and stuff. I don't know what. I have no idea of that part of it. But then somewhere maybe in the 11th, 10th month, 11th or 2-3 months after that, the conception happened, and the child is there. So these are the ways in which they work in terms of more helping people, helping people, not exhibiting a siddhi of appearing in 4 places at the same time. And that is not the objective at all.
Correct.
Maximum is to help, that you can help someone, So that's how it works. Yeah.
And the thing is, the power of Kaivalya is, it is so much superior than these little powers which you get.
Yeah.
You are giving away a palace for a cottage by the lake or something. Yeah.
Atul, when you get into the bliss of samadhi, samadhi is very nourishing.
Yeah.
It's very, very energizing also. Very peaceful, very blissful. When you start experiencing that, you say nothing compares to this. I don't need anything.
Correct. But you have to get there, not get waylaid by all this.
These are all.
And this is why Tantra gets a bad name. This is where Tantra is a very sublime thing, very very potent, very fantastic technique. I'm practicing Tantra sadhana, but a lot of tantrics, they misuse these powers and
and they stay at a certain level. They don't evolve. They had the potential of
once they start using it, then they'll fall.
They just fall. And you commercialize it. The problem is there's a commercial element. You start charging people.
Yeah.
Our Swamiji doesn't even the lectures where many people come and get enlightenment, like when you attend a wise man's lecture. In the West, when he was in USA, they said, please put a charge to this. Please put at least $100. And this is the way US works. Nothing of value is given free.
Correct.
And he said, no, this is our, this is something which I got free from my guru and from our texts. I have no right to